Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel / podcast where we discuss all things related to the fiber arts. I talk about knitting, spinning, processing fleece, weaving, and a little bit about felting, and really anything else that has to do with the fiber arts. I am pretty creative and I like to engage in a lot of crafts. You'll see over here on this top shelf of my bookshelf, actually the top two shelves, these are all books that I have handmade, and so I like to do that. I like to paint and draw. I like to make jewelry, but the thing I come back to time and time again is the fiber arts. And so that's mainly what I talk about on this channel, but I will from time to time bring in other crafts that I get into. For example, I am thinking about starting to spend some more time doing hand embroidery. I've done some before, but that's probably something you'll see coming up in a few weeks. For this episode, we're going to talk about mainly knitting and a little bit of spinning. So I've got not as many acquisitions, thank goodness for my finances, as I did in the last podcast. Instead, I only have one, and there's a reason for it. So we're going to start off talking about that. Then I am going to go over one almost finished objects. Then we will get into future knitting plans, and we're going to wrap up everything with talking about over dyeing some yarn that I had previously dyed and did not. It's not that I hated the way it turned out, it's just that I did it as an experiment to learn more about the process of dyeing, and I didn't think it would be real pretty when I knitted it up. So I over dyed some yarn. And we're also going to talk about my future spinning plans. A few other things might come up, but for the most part, that is it. And I'm going to give everyone a disclaimer off the bat here. I am not feeling my best today. This is the fourth time that I have sat down to record this because my thoughts just aren't tracking. I have Crohn's disease and I'm just kind of having a lot of pain, not feeling great today. But I wanted to get on and talk to you all because it's been about 2 weeks since my last video / podcast, and that's the schedule that I would like to keep. I'd like to upload one of these longer, sort of chatty type videos about every 2 weeks. I might try to slot in some tutorials in between the longer podcast-like episodes, but for now, count on about every 2 weeks I will upload an episode. So bear with me. Anyway, let's get into talking about all things fibery. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is a knit-along sponsored by the Woolly Thistle, which is a New England yarn shop. I believe they are located in Maine. I'm going to put a link to their shop and to their YouTube channel in the show notes below. But I recently found them on YouTube, and I have been binging all of their videos. First off, they just seem like the women who own the shop, they just seem like the kind of women that you could just sit down and hang out with for an afternoon, just in a cozy place, enjoying knitting together, and just really having a wonderful time. Another thing is, I'm really intrigued by their yarn offerings, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. It feels really like a unique store to me. And then third, the other thing that I really like about their videos is that often they will interview some of the shepherds who have the flocks from which they get their yarn. So the Woolly Thistle specializes in yarn from Europe, and that's one reason that I find the shop unique. But the other reason that I really am interested in this shop is that they tend to, because they're importing yarn from Europe, they are working with a lot of sheep breeds that we don't see a lot of yarn from here in the U.S. In the U.S. and in a lot of other places, most other places I would say, but in the past several years we've really become focused on the softness of the yarn that we're working with. So merino, alpaca, next to skin fibers, that's what we've really been seeing a lot of. And I completely get that. I am someone who cannot tolerate really itchy fibers. In fact, things that other people will be able to wear next to their skin, I often won't be able to, especially in this area, along the collar area, along my chest area. If it's itchy, my skin will turn red. I'll be distracted all day and uncomfortable. So I understand the pursuit of fine, next to the skin, soft yarns. And that honestly is the majority of the yarn that I knit with. However, as I've been watching the episodes from the Woolly Thistle, it seems like they are specializing in a more woolly yarn, a more rustic feeling yarn. And I think that's great because I both spin. You can see one of my matchless wheel over there in the corner of the shot. And I'm a spinner. So one of the things that is really fascinating to me is working with fibers from different sheep breeds. And so as a knitter, that's both a blessing and not really a curse, but for me with sensitive skin, something difficult. So I can spin these fibers that are, woollier, but I have to be really intentional in what I am planning to use the yarn for that I'm spinning. So all of that is an introduction to the yarn that I purchased for this sweater knit along. Now the rules of the knit along from the Woolly Thistle are that the yarn you use, 80% of it needs to have been purchased at some point from the Woolly Thistle. And I think that's entirely reasonable. They are a small business, and where they are specializing in these European yarns, I'd imagine that in one way specializing in your market probably creates a customer who really comes back because they know that you might be able to provide fibers and yarns for them that they can't get elsewhere. But on the other hand, it might be a smaller customer base. So I fully support using yarn from the Woolly Thistle for this knit along. And I was watching one of their more recent podcasts, and they have a new line coming into the store. It is by Jaeger Spun, and it is a sport weight yarn. It is 50% undyed Gotland, and that's why it has this halo that I am hoping you can see. That is the Gotland, and then it is combined with 50% of dyed wool top. And so the color here that I have is brick, and I am planning to knit the Mariechen cardigan by Isabell Kraemer. Now, I'm telling you all about the difference between a more woolly yarn and a softer yarn because while I was watching the YouTube video, which I'm going to link below so that you can see it, the women from the shop were all talking about the softness of this wool. Now, because I'm a spinner, I know a little bit more about the properties of different breeds than I would probably if I were only focusing on knitting. So they were talking about how soft this yarn is. And I want to say that for a Gotland based yarn, it is very soft. If we are talking about just thinking about it as Gotland wool. In the video, if you watch it, you'll hear them say that it's already soft in the skein, which it is, but once you swatch and block it, or once you wash, do a swatch and block it, which this is my swatch, knit on size 3 needles. I'm trying to get this to focus a little better. And I don't think that it is doing that, is it? But anyway, you can see it's a beautiful drapey fiber or fabric. It is definitely softer once it is washed and blocked. However, for those of you who are like me, there we go, maybe we see a little bit more of this stitch definition. Those of you who are like me and have extremely sensitive skin, for me this is not wearable next to my skin. And that's why I decided to make a cardigan, because I think this will be just lovely. Look at that fabric. This will be lovely for a nice light autumn cardigan that I can just throw on top of, maybe something like this, and pair with maybe a white t-shirt, jeans, some boots. I think that that'll just make a beautiful outfit. So I am now going to show you my almost finished object. And obviously I am stuck on this burgundy or brick color because I showed you the shawl I was working on last time, the I Heart Lace shawl, and I've made a lot of progress. I am almost finished. As I talked about last time, this is a shawl that is knit from the top down. It's got an increase, center increase, and you increase on each side. So I have been able to finish quite a bit. I told you that I was combining, let me get this, two different colors of yarn. I have finished with the first color that I was using. Both of these are by the hand dyer Rhapsody in Hue, and she has got some beautiful, beautiful yarn, you all. I purchased this at the Kentucky Wool and Sheep Festival, and I bought it, I think, in 2019, before the pandemic. That tells you how long I have been away from knitting, because normally I would have started knitting with it right away. But anyway, so it is a triangle shawl, a lot of stockinette stitch. The whole body here is stockinette except for that center increase. And then there is going to be lace, a lace edging. I am at the part where I am starting the lace edge. I have not done any yet. What I did, since I knew I was going to be combining yarns, is I stopped about 5 rows from the start of the lace pattern, and I started using my new color of yarn. And then my next row that I knit here will be the start of the lace pattern, the lace edging, and it will be in this color. It is called Backcountry Tweed, I believe. Yes, Backcountry Tweed. I just, in playing with this, had some stitches slip, so I'm going to put these back on real quick. No big deal if we slip stitches, it happens. There we go, back on, saved. But it is this nice tweedy yarn, colors of burgundy, green, cream, pinks, with nice tweedy bits in here. So this is going to be the lace part. I'll be finished with this probably in the next day or two. And so in the next episode, I should be able to show you the completed shawl. Then, let's see. I'm going to talk about things I'm thinking about knitting next. I am a pretty monogamous knitter. However, since I will be doing a cardigan, I am planning on doing a few smaller projects along with that. And one of those is going to be knitting a slouchy hat out of this beautiful purple. Isn't that pretty? It is the softest. Now, if you want soft yarn, this is really soft yarn. It is 50% silk, 50% cashmere. So I might actually not do a hat. They showed this at the shop with a hat, but silk, and it does have 50% cashmere, but as you can see, I think you can see even in this cake here, it's going to come up and make a pretty drapey pattern. So what I might do is just make sort of a really small shawlette or something that would add some warmth or color up here, because this one I could wear all day long. This cashmere is not itchy, and then it's combined with silk, and the silk is what, when you're dyeing, silk takes dye very, very easily. And so I am guessing, I did not dye this, but I am guessing that the darker purple that you see in here is the silk, and that the lighter purple is the cashmere. I have never dyed cashmere, and I have dyed silk, but I did not dye this. So, you know, it's as I'm talking that I'm thinking more and more that I will probably just do a small scarf or shawlette, because I don't think that the hat, I'm afraid it'll end up getting stretched out. So, and then that's the only thing that I have definite plans to knit right now. I have a few other things that I am thinking about, but nothing that's 100% yet. So I am now going to show you some of the dyeing that I did over the last weekend. So this yarn is a merino, and I believe I did not save the tags that came with it, but it has a little bit of a sheen to it. And I know some of my yarn bases, I had a merino and silk. I'm not 100%, but I think this is either just 100% merino, or it is like an 85% merino, 15% silk. Anyway, I'm going to insert, if I can, a picture right here of the way I had originally dyed 3 skeins of this yarn. And the dye turned out nicely. It was a yarn in 3 colors. It had a large, dark, deep burgundy section, a deep green, and then a bright purple. And I did that combination of colors because, especially the burgundy and green, it's when I was learning to dye. And so you have to be really careful when you are dyeing different colors next to each other, because if you think back to color theory or the color wheel when you were in elementary school, certain colors that are opposite from each other on the color wheel will not work well together if they blend. They'll turn into kind of a muddy, ugly color. So the burgundy and the green would not have merged well. And so I was really trying to practice dyeing two opposite colors. And then I just threw the other color in there too, because why not? So they were practice skeins, and I loved the way they turned out. But honestly, I was looking at them and thinking about the type of knit fabric that it would make, and I don't think I would have been happy with it, and I don't think I would have ever used it. So I decided to over dye these 3 skeins, and so that required some planning because, like I just said, I was working with colors that were basically red and green, opposite from each other on the color wheel. So I had to really think about the color that I was going to use to over dye the yarn. I knew I wanted to kettle dye it. Now that means that I'm going to submerge the entire skein into a pot or kettle of water. And so I knew I didn't want to take the time to individually paint each section with dye or sit, and I've done some where I dip dye different parts of the yarn, and I'll have different pots of dye out, and I will dip sections in different colors to dye it that way. And that's actually how I did the original skeins. So I had to pick a color that would be able to be blended with each color on this skein of yarn and turn out with something pretty. So I picked a dark blue because blue and green can work together and be blended together and make a nice deep blue-green. Blue and red make purple, and then purple and blue obviously can work together because blue is one of the components of making purple. So for example, yellow would not be a color to over dye this with for a couple of reasons. 1, yellow would be too light, and 2, the yellow and the purple are opposite on the color wheel, so they would turn to mud. So it took a while to over dye this. I had to make 2 attempts because the yarn was so saturated with color and dye from the first time that I dyed it that it took a while to be able to absorb the new dye that I was putting in there. So I'm going to hold it up for you. As you can see from back here, it might look like it's all a dark black, but actually we have some different tones in here, and I am hoping that you can see this is the burgundy area, and in person it looks more of a deep purplish, like a plum color. And then this section, yeah, you can see this section a little more. This was the purple area. See that? You can see it's a nice deep, almost like a midnight purple. And here you can see this is the burgundy coming up against that deep blue, or where it used to be purple. And then the green area was actually the hardest to work with because it had absorbed so much dye. So you can see it's a really deep green, and you can see here's the color transition to the dark purplish. So here you can see a little bit of the purple, burgundy, and then the green. So that is how it turned out. I am really happy with it. It reminds me almost a little bit of the colors in a Black Watch plaid. So here we go. This is giving you an idea. So I'm really happy with it. And for me, this will make a more pleasing color palette when I do knit it up. I have 3 skeins here that obviously are three things that I have got to skein up. And I believe this will be a total of about 1,200 yards. I think it's a little less than that, maybe 800 yards. Anyway, I'm not sure at all what I'm going to do with that, but I'm really happy with the way the colors turned out. So we are about at the end now, and the last thing that I wanted to show you all is what I think I am going to spin next. So as I said in my last episode, it has been a long time since I have been involved in anything fibery. So I dove back in knitting first, and I have not done any spinning since I brought everything back up and into my craft / office room. So my plan is to start back into spinning softly, with something that's easy for me. So you can see there's my matchless spinning wheel. I have my Spinolution Echo right next to it. Let me see if you can see. Okay. And on my matchless, you can see sitting on the bobbin the last thing that I spun, which was a gradient yarn. So I need to take that off and skein that up, which I'll be doing soon. But what I think I am going to spin next is this hand-dyed combed top roving. It is in the color Deep Ocean, which is these lovely shades of blue, kind of like the yarn I just dyed, a little bit. I really love anything blue. It's my favorite color. So this is 100% merino and so incredibly soft, beautiful. And it is I bought this at a new yarn store in my area called Stitches, or Stitch, just Stitch. And it is by Malabrigo. And it is just absolutely gorgeous. It says it is kettle dyed, and yeah, definitely. Kettle dyeing I really love because it does produce these beautiful variations in tone. So I am hoping to have this, maybe I'll have this spun up by the next episode. I am also working on processing that giant bag of 6 pounds of fleece. I believe it's Rommeldale. I'm working on processing that. I did not do a very good job of this first batch. I just took kind of 2 handfuls because it's been a while, and I think I felted some, but we'll see. So that is it for now. Thank you for sticking with me, and thanks for all of the comments that you all left me. It's just really great to be back in this community again. So until next time, I wish you peace, and I wish you all the joys that being involved in the fiber arts can bring you. Bye-bye.